In the Business Secretary's latest speech, Kemi Badenoch said that Britain is now an international trading powerhouse thanks to Brexit. Badenoch was referring to the first ever paperless shipment between Britain and Singapore, which she says avoided needless paperwork and red tape. Now, this comes after the latest report shows that the UK goods and services exports rose between 2019 and 2022. So is she right? Has Brexit been good for business? Nina, what's your thoughts?
You know, when I heard this, I thought it was the same as when Suella Braverman said that she was going to take away tents from homeless people at the start of winter, basically. I thought it was some kind of bizarre joke. You know, you can pick and choose little deals here and there, but basically our economy has shrunk since we left the EU. We don't have any major trade deals. She's talking about a deal with Florida. Where is the deal with the whole of the states?
Well, that's been
mooted for a long time.
Yes.
Obama said, get to the back of the queue, and we are.
And Biden said the same.
Exactly. And India. Now, we've been sucking up to India for years now. Boris Johnson went off and was it 2019, 2020 visited. They keep inviting Modi over. Zilch, nothing. We have a trade deal with Australia and New Zealand, which is going to basically work against our farmers apart from anything else. I heard somebody talking about, somebody was questioned about, well, what are we sending to them? And there was a long pause and they said, well, we're trading Little Moon mochi balls. Now, I don't know.
They are delicious.
They are delicious.
They are really good.
But in Australia, they're not necessarily crying out for them. Australia is very close to...
Also, I would have thought they were Japanese, right?
They are Japanese. They are Japanese, and they're delicious, and I love them. But it's not something that Australia is desperate for, because either you've been to Australia, Australia's proximity to the Far East, as it were, they have their own mochi balls. They have any kind of Asian food or delicacy you want. There's the Pacific trade deal, which is going to come into force in 10 years' time and be worth 0.09%. And she's talking about things coming on stream in 2035. Well, Otis will be a teenager. She's looking towards 2050. You'll be nearly 60 then.
All right, no need to rub it in. Rebecca, look at you. Oh, shocked, Rebecca's shocked, stunned. I know I can't believe I'm going to be 60 one day either, but that will happen, I hope. So when we're looking at Brexit, it does feel a little bit like the benefits of Brexit are all in the future, Rebecca. Do you think that's true, or do you think people have benefited now?
Listen, obviously, Deputy Leader of UKIP, I think we probably know where I roughly stand on these points. I do think this is a good start, but the government were never prepared for Brexit. They were never prepared to start taking the opportunities and running with it. They didn't have a plan. They didn't think Brexit was going to happen. Even when it happened, they didn't think it was going to happen. So we've had an incredibly slow start. Many opportunities have not been taken. But there are showing some good results. You know, it is not all doom and gloom completely. You know, we are talking about 3/4 of businesses now get their stock from UK suppliers. When we're talking about making Britain great, shouldn't we be, you know, manufacturing here, doing everything that we possibly can here to make Britain great and supporting our own, rather than obviously looking after the rest of the world and everything else that comes with it? You know, we do have opportunities to take from this, you know, and obviously having new UK suppliers is obviously one part of it, and the results are showing that it is happening. Britain is not yet a powerhouse. She's got a little bit premature on this point. I do think we have the potential to get there. I don't think it is anytime soon, but I think that there has to be an admittance. We've been really slow off the mark. We're sorry. Here's now what we're going to do.
Okay, let's go to the call. Sorry, Nina, I'm going to get to you in just a minute again, but I want to speak to Nigel first from Warwickshire. Nigel, what's your thoughts? Has Brexit made Britain the UK a powerhouse?
Brexit was the greatest democratic vote in world history. The British trade is now booming. Of course, the Remainers, including people in the media, like one of your panellists, try to block it with false propaganda. But it's booming, and the consumer is winning. I know the argument that we must be protective of our farmers is rubbish. The EU is a protective bloc, and that is harm to the consumer. inflation in the EU is worse than in this country. Our consumers will get cheaper goods. I mean, for instance, I get cheap tomatoes from Morocco. Fantastic. We are benefiting. The consumer benefits from this, and that boosts the economy.
Nigel, can I just ask very quickly, what industry do you work in? What do you do?
I'm an accountant. I've worked in financial services, in public sector as well.
You've crunched the numbers, and Brexit's good for us.
I'm good at business modelling, unlike the Treasury and the OBR. In fact, the OBR has refused to answer my freedom of information requests. They refused because they will not admit they were wrong about immigration and wrong about trade. Our immigration is brilliant now because we have great people from the rest of the world boosting the economy, such as stated by no other than Professor Portes, who was himself a Remainer.
But hold on, our net migration has gone up.
Exactly, and we're getting quality people, boosting the productivity of the economy. And J.D. Portes, professor, who was
much of those numbers, Nigel, are to do with people coming over on small boats. Is that beneficial?
Well, that's not to do with Brexit, is it? That's to do with the problems in the EU, and Britain being a great country. These people want to come to this country because it's a great country.
Interesting.
Unlike the EU.
Nigel, I'm going to put some of your comments to Nina, and the first one was that Remainers perpetuated a false narrative when it came to Brexit.
I really refute that. There was no false narrative from the vote Remain side. What there was a false narrative from the Leave side. They were complete lies. £350 million a week to the NHS. How's that going, Nigel?
In fact, we're now saving ourselves over £300 million a day. Because if we were still in the EU, because of the recovery fund, we would be paying the EU about 80 billion a year. 80 billion a year. And in fact, the EU is now demanding another 100 billion from EU countries. They're asking for another 100 billion just because they're short of cash.
You haven't answered me about the NHS.
I've just told you, we're saving over 300 billion a day.
In that case, where's that money going? So then how come the NHS is on its knees?
Yeah, because the government's incompetent.
Nigel,
because the NHS administration is a joke.
But can I also ask you, Nigel?
They're incompetent.
You talked about getting tomatoes from Morocco. Before Brexit, where did you get your tomatoes from?
Unfortunately, from Holland.
Or
if you try
Morocco.
Tomatoes, they're better quality tomatoes, and they're cheaper.
Oh, come on!
They're cheaper, and they're coming via pool, which is 3 days quicker than going via truck over through Spain and France. It's quicker and cheaper and greener.
Nigel, also, I just need to correct you on something. You said we're saving 300 billion by not being in the EU. Apparently, the number's closer to 10 billion. So it's still
that's wrong. That's
still
wrong.
quite a saving. Okay, well we can dispute that, but there is a dispute there to be had.
And can I say to Nigel, when the Windsor Framework Agreement was announced by Rishi Sunak, he was very proud to make that decision and the regulations on behalf of Northern Ireland. And he said that Northern Ireland was going to be in a fantastically privileged position because Northern Ireland uniquely would have access to the UK market, the UK home market, and the EU single market. Now, he said nobody in the world's got that. We had that before Brexit.
We still have access. You've not heard of our great free trade deal with the EU. One of the greatest free trade deals in the world. You've not heard of that.
Okay, but Brexit did cause a bit of issue in Northern Ireland politically that still sort of rumbles on, Nigel. You have to sort of admit to that. I wonder, though, whether, Rebecca, we are being maybe too short-sighted. Maybe we need to look longer term. And actually, I'll put this to you, Nina, that leaving Brexit, we look at the successes of the government, and one of them was the rollout of the vaccine. That's something that they have been lauded for. Part of that was because we left the EU and we were more nimble, as Kemi Badenoch says that we are now, and we were able to access the vaccines in a way that the EU countries were not.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a fallacy. Because according to, and I've written it down, Regulation 174 in the EU regulations, which would actually, you look it up, and it will allow individual countries in a situation like a pandemic to access and provide their own vaccines.
So why did none of the other countries do that?
Yeah, but they didn't.
Well, I've no idea why they didn't do it, but it was perfectly legal for them to do it.
You don't look convinced, Rebecca.
No, because it didn't happen.
No,
we know exactly what happened, and we know what the reality is. You know, they didn't. We did, because we don't have the red tape, and that is one of the benefits.
No,
and when we talk
didn't
about
have that.
small to medium businesses, when we talk about them as well, it is easier for them to trade now. It was an absolute nightmare before, and obviously being part of the EU, that is an example. Whether the law states whatever it does, but the reality was that we prevailed with the vaccines.
The thing is, we prevailed with the vaccines, but every other country had the right, as we did. We didn't go against EU regulations. You're going to look it up.
OK, I'm going to go to the calls now. Craig from Bedfordshire, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think that we are a business powerhouse, trading powerhouse?
No, what we've done is we've restricted trade with our natural partners, which is Europe. So we've had all these queues in Dover with lorries because of this paperwork that didn't exist for decades. If you try and travel to Europe, you've got to queue up now. If you're an English teacher like me, teaching English abroad, it's so hard for me now to work in Europe to teach English. So the older generation of retired people didn't want European workers in this country. They voted for Brexit. So because of that, we are restricting English people working in Europe, British people working in Europe, and restricting trade with Europe. So now we've got to trade.
OK, Craig, but I suppose that is what most people wanted when they voted Brexit, was it not, Rebecca?
Yeah,
they wanted to have more restrictions between us and the EU.
Yeah, obviously, but also, we're talking about, the trails going into Dover and all of the restrictive paperwork. That's not because of Brexit. That is because of our very incompetent government who can't get their acts together and do something properly, and they weren't prepared for it. If they were, we wouldn't have that.
We're going to have to move on. Thank you very much, Craig, for your call. I know we always have to come to an abrupt stop.